Let's take a look at the switch statement. We have an example here. What is your favorite color? And whatever that color may be, you have a response. What is your name? You have a answer to that question and then a response. So let's take a look at that. That is the switch statement. And we have our colors here and values and things like that. You can change them as you need to, whatever you'd like. Now, what we do is we do it with the if-else way. We've talked about the else-if statement, and I told you it was very handy to use this. But if we want to test for a lot of things, a lot of values, we have to actually put a lot of extra code here to test for each condition there. But to do it easier or have it look better, we could do a switch statement. And what a switch statement does, it takes a value here, a variable in parentheses, just the variable, and then we use a case statement to check for the different cases that we might have here. So you can check for a string or a number. What you do is, it's not as powerful as working with the else if, for example, because you can make some very complex else if statements. But if you're only checking for a range of numbers, certain numbers that you need to check, it's best to use it this way. So in other words, if you're using whole numbers, for example, 0, 5, 10, 100, and you're only checking 5 or so, or less than 5 even, it could be a lot easier to actually check it this way. Else if is very powerful because you have a very powerful way to check for a certain expression to do some testing. But as you can see, switch does have its values. So it's just the case 0, case 100, case 200, etc. Now we do have some other syntax here. We have a break statement. If we didn't have a break statement here, and we could execute as many as we'd like here, as many statements in a row, but if we didn't have a break statement, it would continue to test for the next case and even execute the last case, which is the default case, just like if you're using else in an if-else statement or an if-else statement. So it's really there to make sure that you don't continue. So break will break out of the switch statement. It will break out of this area here. It'll go to the first line after that closing bracket. That's how it works. And so you always use it so it doesn't have to take the time to go through the rest of the switch statements to test for obvious things that aren't true. If it already found out that this $ value is equal to 0, well, it makes no sense to continue to test for the other conditions because it'll never be those values anyway. And you just want to take care of that. Always have a break at the end. So it does add a little bit more overhead, in my opinion, and it does have less functionality, in my opinion, than else if with these statements, but it's a lot easier to write when you have certain things that work. Certain things that work in the way that you need them to. And it's normally used in the cases of numeric data, but you can also use it with string data. And this is an example of string data. This is based on the question that we ask. We're looking for the color, what your favorite color is. If the color is red, then we can echo this out. Then we check for blue. Is the color blue? And it has to equal exactly, since we're checking this to see if this text is the same. So it has to have a capital B and then lowercase LUE exactly in order for it to work. So it's a great way to check for strings. It's really handy. And it'll do the blue and then echo out a response, green, echo out a response, etc., etc., etc. And you would do this a lot within functions. It's very handy within a function and very clear. And if you change the color at the top, the value of color, then this will change based on your needs. Always using the break. And if none of these colors here are in this list of values, then it's going to do the default thing. And that would be to echo out, I've never heard of that color before. So only these 4 here have positive responses. This would have a default, I don't know what that is response. Switch helps a lot with databases and anywhere that you can use them in a way that's going to help you make your job easier and make it very clear. And here you can see something similar with the naming here, $name, and it looks similar. Just be sure to use the break here. If you don't use break, then you can have a different response here, a different outcome, or you can have multiple outcomes. It really, really depends on what you're using for case or what your default value is. So do check it out. Try one without break and see how that would work. but always use a break to make sure that you're covering your bases. That's really the key there, covering your bases, because when you program, you have to check for everything. If you notice in the if-else statements, I mentioned you have to check for something greater than, something less than, and then something equal. Well, if you don't test for all three, or you don't account for all three, then you could run into problems. And in the older days of having languages that really dealt a lot with memory, like C and C++, you can almost say those are the old days these days, you ran into a lot of problems with the fact that if you don't account for everything, memory could get displaced or misplaced or used in the wrong way, and then you would have the application crash for you. And that's not a good thing. And then you have to track down those bugs. So definitely cover your bases.